The Vice Dean of Research, Community Services and Information Systems of Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Respected, the Chairman of the 79 dignitaries of the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada, Professor of Digital Economy, Utrecht University, the Netherlands, Consultant, Ocean Literacy and Blue School Initiative, UNESCO Lisbon University, representative of the Faculty of Law partners, esteemed professors, lecturers, and also our beloved participants who come online and on-site.
Good morning and welcome to all participants and distinguished guests present at this international seminar on enhancement for blue economy and support ecosystem. This international seminar is part of the 79 dignitaries of the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada with the theme Blue Economy. This is a continuation of last year's anniversary theme, Green Economy, which is a form of contribution from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada to sustainable development. This international seminar will convey ideas about how to optimize digital technology to improve the management of a blue economy that is beneficial to the community. This event would not be able to be conducted without our generous support from the partner and the sponsor like Bank Rakyat Indonesia, PT Pertamina Persero, Triweka Rinanti and Partners, and Sinarmas.
We will begin the opening ceremony by singing the national anthem of the Republic Indonesia, Indonesia Raya, created by W.R. Supratman. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please stand up to sing the Indonesian national anthem. Next, we will hear remarks from the Vice Dean of Research, Community Services and Information Systems of Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Please welcome Dr. Heribertus Jaka Triana, SH, LLM, MA.
Thank you, Mas Angga. First of all, to esteemed speakers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, bon dia, goeiemorgen, selamat pagi, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, for the speakers, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, please, I Pass warmest regard from our Dean, Ibu Dahliana Hasan, SMTech PhD, to all of you. Today, he represents me to welcome you in this seminar on a very important topic to be highlighted into our Dies Natalis Faculty of Law Gajah Mada University from the 79th of anniversary. This is a very important issue for us to enhance and also to develop our visions on sustainable development goals, focusing on the blue economy. That is why after this ceremony, we will try to engage and to align our research publications on the blue economy to sustain sustainable development goals in our curriculums in the futures. So your active participants, your active engagements in this seminar are really appreciated to enhance our research and publications in the futures. So thank you very much from the esteemed speakers. You are a long way from your hometowns to encourage our discussions in today's events. So once again, thank you very much and enjoy your stay in Gajah Mada University during our anniversary. Thank you very much, and please have a wonderful remarks in these events. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Heribertus Jakatriana, for the wonderful remarks.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we now proceed to the session of presentation and discussion, which will be led by the Head of Business Law Department of Faculty of Law, Universitas Gajah Mada, and one of her expertise is about intellectual property. Please welcome Mrs. Laurencia Andrini, SH LLM PhD. We also invite the speakers to take their seats at the front. We also pleased to have with us the speaker at the front. First speaker, Professor Master in the Rechten Dr. Sip de Vries, Professor of Digital Economy Utrecht University. And the second speaker, Mrs. Rachel Lawrence Costa, PhD, Consultant Ocean Literacy and Blue School Initiative UNESCO Lisbon University.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed speakers, and also the honorable lecturers, and also our beloved students. So in this event, we are going to hear some sharings from the expertise of Professor de Vries and also Dr. Costa. And within the next 1 hour, or 1.5 hours, we are going to learn more about what is EU's role in the digital market. We know nowadays that EU is one of the leading countries that have regulations on how the digital market should run. And also we will learn from Dr. Costa with regards to like how to enhance or how to implement blue economy in our curriculum or in the higher institution educations. And without further ado, I'll give the chance to Professor de Vries first. Please, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having invited me here. It's a great honor to be here at your university, to be here in Yogyakarta. I would like to thank, of course, Professor Santosa very much, Professor Wibowo very much, an old colleague from mine at Utrecht University. Very special to be here. As I told my colleagues here at Yogyakarta, actually approximately 30 years ago, one of my two brothers was here as well at this university. However, I understand he was on the other side of the campus because he was doing a PhD in physics. So that's a completely different topic. I'm not going to talk about physics, obviously, because I'm a legal scholar, so I'm going to talk about the law. But it's really very special for me, also as his brother, to be back here in Yogyakarta. So already made a lot of pictures for him. He had very good memories from this university 30 years ago. So what I will do is kind of give you a bird's eye overview of the regulation of the digital transition in the European Union. Of course, it will be impossible for me to go into details, but if you have any questions, please ask them afterwards to me, or if you want to engage in a discussion with me later on after I have gone back to the Netherlands, then don't hesitate to contact me. Just send me an email and I would be happy to well, at least to try to answer your questions, which will undoubtedly be very challenging. So the next slide, please. I think I have to do a demos like that. Yes, thank you. So yes, so I will talk about the digital transition in the European Union, and I will, first of all, in the introduction, I will look at how the situation was actually some time ago and how it is now, and I will also sometimes just try to make the link to the blue economy, because that is, after all, now the theme of today's seminar. So how does the regulation of the digital economy and digital transition actually relate to the blue economy, or what in the EU they say, and that's the next slide, please, a green and digital future. Because also in the European Union, just like here the theme of today, the blue economy, they actually see a clear link between the digital and the green. So how digital technologies can enhance a more sustainable, you could say, society, a more inclusive society. So on the one hand, and that is especially recognized by not only the European Commission, which you could say is the administrative body in the European Union, but also by the EU legislator, the European Parliament and the Council and the 27 member states, that indeed digital technologies can really enhance a more sustainable future. Yet on the other hand, we have to realize as well that digital technologies, and I always say that to my students when they open their laptops and they sit there with their laptops and say, well, and now you think you work paperless, so that's very sustainable. No, but you use a lot of energy and that's not sustainable. And so for example, the development of AI, it uses very much energy, and which may have detrimental effects for our Earth, our climate. So there are positive effects of using digital technologies, but there are definitely also downsides that we have to recognize. Now, I think the downsides have gained not so much attention yet, not by the legislator, the positive effects perhaps a bit more. But that's something we could always come back to in the discussion. The next slide, please. So let's now zoom into the digital economy, more specifically. So what have we seen, you could say, or what did we see before, some time ago? Well, first, a kind of laissez-faire approach. So let digital technologies thrive. Let they develop them by themselves. Let not regulate digital technologies. And that's good for innovation, after all. That's good for economic development. That's good for growth. So we're not setting in place rules that kind of hamper that innovation. So that was the approach, what I call the laissez-faire approach, and we see that to some extent still in, for example, the United States, where there's a different approach to how to regulate digital technologies compared to Europe or the European Union. Secondly, in relation to that, we see a very important role for private actors. After all, it's the big tech firms that set the rules and the standards when it comes to, you could say, digital technologies, no? So private actors play a crucial role precisely because the state, public authorities are basically absent or have been absent in the digital marketplace. The third important characteristic is, of course, data and information, our data, our personal data, because without our personal data, these tech firms could not exist. They could not provide these services in the first place. So social media platforms, they need our personal data in order to provide these services. So data and information are kind of the new oil in the digital economy. That is crucial. A fourth important characteristic is the rate of technological change. Can the law keep up to date to these developments that go so rapidly? No, like 10 or 20 years ago, we hardly knew about, well, social media platforms were already in the making, obviously. But think about ChatGPT, also a very interesting development, no? So we discussed that a lot in my university as well with the students. So how to use or not use ChatGPT when you write your papers, for example. It's a very helpful tool, but how to guide that, how to be able to make good use of that. Now, the European Union legislator has now adopted the AI Act, an AI regulation. One of the first ones, I'm always a little bit doubting whether Brazil was not first, because they have also regulation on AI, but the European Union has now an AI legislation. It's unique in the world. When the first drafts came out in 2020 of the AI regulation, so the proposal before it was being adopted, ChatGPT did not exist. So the European Commission had to, in 4 years' time, suddenly was ChatGPT, oh, we have to include that in this regulation as well, because that's also AI, no? So it goes so fast. So can we, as legislators, can we always stay up to date when it comes to these technological developments? Are we not always too late, in other words? And then a last very important characteristic in the digital economy is it's not only about economy in the narrow sense, it's not only about the market, but it's always also about public interests. Because after all, it's, for example, our personal data that are used to provide services. And that is a fundamental right, no? A right we are encroaching upon our privacy. We are encroaching perhaps on human dignity. We are encroaching upon other fundamental rights like freedom of expression, freedom of information, how to balance all these different interests in the digital economy. So it's not only the market, but actually it's public interests, non-market interests that are being commercialized. And that is something new. At least we think it's something new. The next slide, please. Just before I come to that, the fact that public interests and market interests are so much conflated in the digital economy, we call that the blurring lines between the commercial and public spaces. And a very famous German philosopher, Jürgen Habermas, recently wrote a book. Well, this is in German. I'm not quite sure whether it has been translated already into English, but he wrote about the dangers actually of these blurring lines between the commercial and public spheres. And I think, yeah, what he wrote just quite recently, we already see happening now, about the public domain that is being commercialized, how social media platforms impact our elections, for example, our democratic processes. So that is really important to recognize. It's something very special for the digital economy. The next slides, please. So this was the situation you could say, when it comes to the laissez-faire approach some time ago. Now, it was already mentioned that, indeed, the European Union has taken action, has legislated, regulated the digital economy. And now we say, I'm not sure whether I could say that, like the EU is a front runner. I think that's how it is being seen. It's always maybe a bit blunt term to use, but it is a front runner in legislating the green and digital transition, you could say. I just give you a few examples of what the European Union has done in terms of binding laws, binding on all the 27 member states. In that sense, you could say the European Union, we don't like to use the word federation, but it really has an impact when it legislates, because all the 27 member states have to follow this legislation, and all the courts will have to follow this legislation too. So an example in the more green, you could say, field is the eco-design regulation. So all products which will be marketed and sold on the European market will have to have a so-called digital product passport, so that manufacturers but also consumers know that these products are being manufactured in a sustainable manner. We have the General Data Protection Regulation. You probably heard about that regulation, which is quite a far-reaching piece of legislation giving us, as European, you could say, citizens, a right to protection of personal data. We have, for example, to regulate the digital economy, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. They particularly target platforms and big tech firms. And we have, as I said, the AI Act, regulating artificial intelligence, which, of course, as we know, can have benefits for our society, but there are, of course, also a lot of dangers for our society. And that is what this act seeks to kind of regulate, seeks to balance. Now, the question is, to what extent can the European legislator really realize an inclusive and sustainable digital economy? We talk about the blue economy today. Has the European Union legislator also been able to realize that? Next slide, please. Now, I want to draw your attention to one of those pieces of legislation, the Digital Services Act, which recently entered into force last year, actually, and particularly the fight of the European Union against disinformation and illegal content. I mean, this is something very topical, and probably you have a lot of discussion, at least I heard that yesterday evening here in Indonesia, about this phenomenon as well, and you probably all use social media, no? To some extent. Maybe some of you have already abandoned it. Some colleagues of mine, they left X, for example, or Meta, Instagram, but because of recent developments in the US, I'm not going to give any political kind of stance here, but still we are very much using these big social media platforms. Now, the European Union is now seeking to regulate this. How does it do that? Next slide, please. So, to give you a very concrete example, last year, 17th of December, the European Commission opened formal proceedings under this Digital Services Act, this European regulation against TikTok. You all know what TikTok is, social media platform, and why did it do so? Because TikTok is being accused as a social media platform from doing too little against the manipulation of voters, and this happened in Romania during the presidential election. At that time, that a Romanian presidential candidate that was predicted to get 2% of the votes suddenly won the first rounds of the presidential election, gaining more than 20% of the votes. How could that happen? Nobody saw that in the making. And then they found out, and there was more and more evidence, that actually social media platforms played a big role in manipulating voters. You could say, not themselves actively, but doing little against it. They were used to manipulate voters, to steer the electoral, you could say, process and also the outcome, the voting outcomes. Now, this is something that is, I think, extremely dangerous and a development that is increasingly happening with elections all over the world. The role of social media platforms in these. So, for example, recommender systems that are used by social media platforms, they were manipulated, you could say, or used in order to steer voters all the time to this particular, you could say, presidential candidate, to vote for him. Well, and that seemed to work. Now, the Romanian Constitutional Court, which was also an unprecedented move, annulled these election results. And there's a lot of anger about that, because this is basically the first time that a constitutional court does that, based on maybe not very clear evidence yet that this election process didn't work very well. Next slide, please. Now, the question is this all new? I already mentioned, I would come back to this, is this all new? I always like to look into history, and I think we all should do that, to find perhaps answers that can help us in our current time. And one of these authors, Roman Kranaric, he's, you wouldn't expect perhaps from his name, but he's an Australian author living in the United Kingdom, and he wrote this wonderful book that I can recommend you to read, The History for Tomorrow, where he looks at historical events and how they also can help us to explain current events and maybe find answers for that. Because you could say social media posts were even already spread by the Romans 2,000 years ago. You see here a picture of Cicero. They used slaves in order to spread, news, including fake news. So that's what happened 2,000 years ago. Now, the other picture shows the invention of the printing press. And of course, that also led to huge, you could say, benefits for society and for humanity, because suddenly people could start to learn how to read, and not only a very small section of the population. So it has really benefits, but it also led to the spread of, you could say, disruption, fake news, witch hunts that happened all over Europe and perhaps all over the world. Yeah, so there are always downsides and there are always positive effects. Now, can we learn from that as to how to regulate, for example, social media platforms? Next slide, please. So if we look at this regulation, the Digital Services Act, then we see it's a regulation which is a binding law upon all 27 member states of the European Union, wherein the EU seeks to balance market interest, so a free movement, you could say, of services across the digital market in the European Union, with the protection of fundamental rights, which is human dignity, which is gender equality, which is the freedom of expression, the freedom of information. Then it also contains rules, basically due diligence requirements for media platforms. And it contains rules on liability, because normally we would say, okay, these platforms, are they the ones that are wrong? Not necessarily, because they're simply an intermediary, no? If you put a post on a social media platform, then the person who puts the post on the platform is in the wrong, if that is illegal content or hate speech, for example. Not the platform, you would say. So in principle, it's not the platform's fault. They simply facilitate the movement of a service to the consumer. So in principle, the platform is not liable for this wrongdoing. But there are limits to that, and these limits are regulated in this regulation. Now, particularly where the very large online platforms are concerned, and the very large online service search engines, the VLOPs and the VLOSEs, they have specific duties. TikTok, Meta, X, for example, Google Search. These are all very large online platforms or search engines, and they have specific obligations under this regulation to mitigate certain risks. And I have put it here on the slide, for example, when it comes to human rights violations, when it comes to elections, when it comes to public health. And then lastly, we have a supervision and enforcement mechanism that is foreseen by this regulation. The European Commission plays an important role when it comes to the big tech firms. It can impose fines. Fines up to 6% of the global turnover of the companies, which is a lot of money, but probably not sufficient to really curtail the power of X, no? And then we have also national authorities that are involved in supervising this regulation. Next slide, please. Now, this is just an overview of those very large online platforms and search engines that have been identified by the European Commission and that are subject to more strict regulations. So you see here just a quick overview of who those are. And some of them you probably know now. There's also dispute, for example, with Shine and Temu, which are the Chinese shopping platforms, and the EU. And also when it comes, by the way, to sustainability questions. The next slide, please. I will come to a rounding up. So very briefly, I already said that, next slide, please. When it comes to the supervision and the enforcement, we have a system in the digital economy of the European Commission playing an important role in, for example, imposing fines on companies. But we have also national administrative authorities that have a particular role foreseen in the legislation. But we should not forget in the system of the EU the role of the national courts. National courts in the EU are also European Union courts, we say. And I am a judge myself, next to being a professor in Utrecht University. That is something that is possible. So I'm a kind of honorary judge. I sit on specific cases in the field of, you could say, economic administrative law. So we regard ourselves as judges, even if we simply apply Dutch administrative law, also as European Union judges, because Dutch administrative law is impacted by European Union law, and we are forced to apply European Union law if there is a contradiction, for example, between national law and EU law. And that is sometimes very difficult to explain to other parts of the world. How does that work with EU law, European Union law? Well, it is because European Union law is always supreme, always takes precedence over national law, even national constitutional law. So if we have an agricultural regulation, if we have the Digital Services Act, and there are rules in it, and your national constitution might contravene with it, the Digital Services Act takes precedence. Hard to understand, no? But that is how the European Union functions. So it has very far-reaching consequences and big powers for the European Union institutions. And this is all overseen by the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, that plays an important role in developing the law, in applying legislation, in interpreting legislation. So that's in a nutshell how the European Union supervision and enforcement system works. Now let me conclude then. Next slide, please. Because I haven't, next slide, please. Sorry. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, what are now the potential and the limits? Because this is all good news, you could say. If you are an EU law scholar, you live in the European Union, perhaps as a consumer or as a citizen. So the European Union legislator has done a lot in regulating the digital economy. That's good news for the consumers and the citizens, because they are protecting our fundamental rights, our interests. And that is to a large extent true. And I think the Digital Services Act is a quite unique piece of legislation globally, because it's kind of the first law, you could say at a supranational level, that seeks to curtail the power of tech firms when it comes to how they impact the information flows to the citizens. However, it's not always all good news. And as legal scholars, we have to remain critical, of course, because we still are faced with the problem that these developments go so fast. Is the law not already outdated? And I know some of you, PhD students, are working on regulatory experimentation, or sandboxes, as they are called. And I think that's very, very good, because that's a very innovative innovative approach to look at the law? A regulatory sandbox? Can we not more use experimental legislation? There are downsides to that because there's a legitimacy question. The parliaments are not involved in regulatory sandboxes. So we see little yet of use in the EU. In the AI Act, the new regulation, the newest, there is some reference to regulatory sandboxes. Secondly, the EU has still limited powers to protect our fundamental rights and democracy. That's a task for the member states. Thirdly, the big tech firms, they do not originate from Europe. They originate from the US and from China, mainly. So Europe is a front runner when it comes to legislation, but not when it comes to the firms themselves. And that causes problems, because they have really a lot of power and political influence. So will the European Commission, in enforcing the Digital Services Act vis-à-vis TikTok, but also X and Meta, there are proceedings ongoing between these, with regard to these two platforms, will they be able to stand the political pressure from Mark Zuckerberg or Mr. Musk? I hope so, but we will have to wait and see. And then, of course, we have the geopolitical situation, which is rapidly changing, no? You have to read the news every day, either to get scared or maybe to get hopeful, depending on which side you are. But that's rapidly changing. And the EU will have to be careful, because a lot of legislation that the EU issues has extraterritorial effect. It also has effects here in Indonesia. If Indonesian companies want to sell their products or their services on the European market. That's so in the digital economy, but also when it comes to sustainability. We have a new regulation on deforestation, for example, and I know that there's quite a lot of debate in this country about that. We should prevent a new form of imperialism or colonialism by setting the standards and rules for the rest of the world. We should more engage, perhaps, with the rest of the world by just setting the standards on ourselves. So the last question is, coming to the climate and environmental question, could the DSA also deal with climate and environmental disinformation? There's no reference in the legislation to climate or environmental protection itself. So that remains an open question, but maybe something that we can debate. And then the very last slide. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. De Vries, for sharing such a wonderful insights for all of us. And it is indeed concerning that the VLOP and VLOSE dominates like the digital market, not only in the EU, but maybe like almost in every countries in the world. And I guess EU has taken like a step forward by creating a regulation. As you mentioned, it is almost always the first countries or supranational countries to have rules on something. But yeah, the actors are not coming from the EU itself. It's often from the US or from China. Yes. Yeah. My research is also like in terms of text and data mining. So yes, and it's I also found a similar remark to your research that says it is EU has a very strict regulations on text and data mining, but not the players are mostly or not from the EU but from China. Yeah. Okay. And for the second chance, I'll give the floor to Dr. Costa. Right. Time is yours.
Hello to everyone. So my name is Raquel. I'm from Portugal, very far away from here, and I will talk about the ocean. And I think I have a presentation a little bit outside of the law, and the digital aspects, but I think everyone is linked to the ocean, and blue economy is a huge sector that needs to know about ocean literacy, and this is the aspect that I bring to you today. Before that, I would thank you all to be here. It's an honor to me to be in your country and be invited to talk about this. So the second slide, maybe? The other? Next, yes. Okay. So before we talk about what we are doing to the ocean, let's first look at what the ocean does for us. So a quick pool that I bring to you, because I want to learn with you as well, is how you are connected to how connected do you feel to the ocean in your daily life? This is my question to you. In my country, we are all very linked to the ocean because we are a little country, and we have a lot of different culture inspiration with the ocean, and I want to listen to you. Do you feel that the ocean is part of your life? If you feel it, please stand up. If you don't stand up. We don't have a okay. Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, lovely to see it. Thank you so much. Thank you. So next slide. Okay. Yeah, the ocean plays a critical role in keeping our planet habitable. I don't know if you know that. Maybe you are from the Faculty of Law, every one of you, and I bring you some questions about the scientific process, okay? But anyone need to know a little bit about that. So 30% of the dioxide carbon is absorbed by the ocean, okay? This is a lot. So this is the ocean regulates our atmosphere, okay? It's not only the forest. And this is the type of issue that we don't see in the curriculum in the schools. Normally we use the forest and the plants to talk about this type of perspective, but the ocean regulates a lot our planet. Next slide. Thank you. So absorbing the dioxide carbon is just one of the ways that ocean protects us, but it does something very more crucial. It stores heat, okay? So the ocean is like Earth's air conditioner. It absorbs about 90% of the excess heat trapped in the atmosphere due to greenhouse gas emissions. So the impact that the ocean has in our lives is really huge. Without the ocean acting as a heat buffer, the global temperature would be rising much faster than they already are. So Let's keep it in mind in our daily life. Okay. Next slide. But the ocean isn't just about nature. It's also a highway for the global economy. More than 80% of the world trade depends on maritime transportation. All the lines that you see in the ocean are the tracking of the big vessels. And I put in the square, I zoom into your ocean here near the Indonesia. And this a lot of, the tracking is very close here in this region of the planet. So we need to think about this. Most of the products we use daily, electronics, clothing, food, have likely traveled across the ocean before reaching us. And we need to think about that every day. Okay, next slide. But beyond trade, the ocean also plays a vital role in supporting livelihoods and food security. In fact, billions of people depend on the ocean to eat. So globally, over 3 billion people rely on the ocean for their jobs and food. So that's nearly 40% of the world's population. Okay? So from a small-scale fisher to a large seafood industry, the ocean provides income, nutrition, and stability to communities. Next slide. So far, we've been seeing how the ocean provides us with food, with jobs, and with economic stability. But did you know that it plays a crucial role in medicine and healthcare? I don't know if you know, but during the COVID time, some vaccines were made with some nutrients from the deep ocean, for example. We have another examples of ocean-based medicines, for example, antibiotics, cancer treatments, and painkillers. So they use a lot of different technology to use it in the pharmaceutics. Next slide. So we have been talking about how the ocean regulates the climate, the economy, and the food, and even medicine. But I know in your country as well, the ocean shapes who we are as a people, as a community, and as a society. So the culture and the society is inspired by the ocean as well. So it's not only science, not only economic, but also in the culture we see a lot of different aspects. So how do the ocean shapes the culture? By spiritual and religious practices, inspired by the artistics and the musics are inspired somehow by the ocean as well, and the heritage and the identity of the community as well. So we've seen that the ocean is everywhere, and it's a part of who we are. But now let's make this a little bit personal. I have a question for you. How connected do you feel to the ocean in your daily life? Let's do a reflection. Okay, please, everyone. And Well, you can see in the slide the question, so don't be shy, don't be timid. And can you answer the question? Yeah. Yes, more?
Anyone else?
Come on. Tourism, yes. So the question is, how connected do you feel to the ocean in your daily life? Seafood? For transportation? And in your daily routine, do you feel that the ocean is part of you? Please, talk to us. Yes, but in your perspective, personal life. Wait a little bit. Wait. You need a micro, because I cannot listen to you.
Okay. Because Indonesia archipelago country. So in my personal opinion, I'm from Sumatra. So sea for me, it's the connector from island to island.
Yeah.
So sea for me have pivotal influence for us. Connected Indonesia island from island to Java to Celebes, Java to Sumatra, Java to Borneo.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the first thing when I watch the sea, remember the word of sea, it's transportation. Yeah.
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 It's like your route
Yeah.
for everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. More aspects. Come on. When we breathe, are we linked to the ocean? Yeah, why? Do you want to answer? Yeah, you. Please, don't be shy. Yeah, here.
So it's a bit like, I feel a bit guilty because I know it's really important, but on a day-to-day basis, I don't feel it because I don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, because like my laptop, like my phones, my food, everything comes through the ocean, the fish, but I just don't think about it. You know, it's like air sometimes.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is very important, what you are saying, because even in a country like yours, that the ocean is everywhere, you know, you have so many islands and everything is linked to the ocean because it's nearby. In our daily life, we don't think about that because when we don't see, we don't remind. And this is what the ambition of the ocean literacy movement is, to have in mind every time that we think about something, have in mind our impact in the ocean, because it's our friend. So we need to care about, you know. Okay, thank you so much. Next slide. Yeah, next. Please. Okay, so we talked about what the ocean gives to us, and it's very important to share with you. I don't know if you have this in mind, but we only have one ocean. Usually in geography we say that we have 5 different oceans, but this is the figure that you see, link every, instead of having the lands colored, we colored the ocean. So the ocean is only one. So the impact that we do in one region impacts everyone. And this is very important as well. Next slide. So one of the big threats to the ocean today is warming. The ocean is getting hotter, as you know, and in some areas surface temperature are expected to rise by over 3 degrees Celsius. And this is very important because when the ocean is hottest, we have stronger storms, coral bleaching, for example, and disrupting marine life. So everything is linked to the climate change is affecting the ocean and is affecting us, you know, so everything is linked. Next slide. So this is acidification. It's a chemical process that bleach the corals, and you have a lot of this in this region of the planet. You know about it? This no? You never talk about this in the social, the journals, or no? And in schools? Did you talk about that in schools? No? Raise your hand if yes, you talked about in schools. No, never. So coral bleaching is occurred with high temperatures, and it's caused the coral to lose their color and die. And the ecosystems that lives in this type of ecosystem dies as well. So you have all the chain dying, you know, so it's affecting not only the corals, but everything we eat from the ocean as well, okay? And this is a very important process that everyone should know about. Yeah. So this acidification is just one piece of a much bigger challenge that everyone knows. It's about climate change. The ocean and the climate are deeply connected, and as the planet warms, the ocean absorbs most of that heat, causing this type of the disruption like rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and this will cause a change in ocean current. And when the ocean current will change, it will be forever. Okay? So every time we think about our life, please don't forget it. Okay? Next slide. This is another aspect that is very important, not only for everyone, but in the economic sector. It's about overfishing. Overfishing is a very problematic pressure to the ocean. And it's obviously because of the demand for seafood. This is pushing the marine ecosystems to the limit. Okay, so fishing of course, is an essential source of income and food for the people from everywhere. However, the fish are being depleted beyond levels that which population can recover. Okay? And this is not in the future, it's now. It's happening now. Okay? Next slide. So that's why an ocean literacy movement appeared in a while time ago in the United States. So the ocean literacy, it's a movement that expects to create more awareness and change the behavior of the populations. So this type of movement is very important to care about the planet, not only the ocean, to care about the planet and to care about us. Okay? So this movement was created in 20 years ago in the United States by scientists and educators. So they began this movement, and after 10 years, maybe in 2017, IOC UNESCO expanded this concept globally with the Ocean Literacy for All. And this is a toolkit that you can download from the internet. And today, ocean literacy is part of education, part of policy making, and part of economic sectors in several countries. Next slide. So at the beginning, the ocean literacy was only about the scientific aspects of the ocean. Next slide. But nowadays, because it was a movement that grew in the planet in different countries, the ocean literacy grow and now adds a new perspective that I really think it's better to everyone, because it's a multi-perspective approach of the ocean. So the ocean, it's not only about science, but it's always about economy, history, gender equality, sustainability, values, moral ones, and economic ones, and culture. So this is the way I think we all need to see the ocean. Okay? Next slide. And, well, the ocean literacy began in schools for children in early 2000. But now, the ocean literacy movement grows and have impact in all the sector of the society. But what I want to share with you is that everyone can have a role in this movement. We are not only learners, but we can act and we can share all our knowledge to the others. For example, artists can be included in this type of movement and show to the world the impact of the ocean as an NGO or a public or a private sector. So everyone can be an actor in this problematic. Next slide. So this is a small video about ocean literacy in all the sectors. I don't know if you can... No? Okay. You don't have a play in now? No? Okay. Let's go. Move forward. It's okay. Fine. Let's move forward. Okay. Okay. Are you sleepy? Well, so I build a break too. So I will ask you to take a moment and to reflect that on the community initiatives related to the ocean conservation that you know, or you can imagine. Okay, take a minute only. I know that in your country you have initiatives related to this. But if you don't know them, try to think about one initiative, one action that you could effectively do in your country to complement the political aspects here, to protect your region, the ocean. So think a little bit and then discuss this with your colleague from the chair, the other side of you, and then take a minute, think, discuss, and then share with us. 2 minutes. Don't forget to turn to the person next to you and share your thoughts. Okay, did you think about a little bit? So local, in my opinion, local initiatives are key to global change. Okay, we don't need to do a big projects, even when we have some impact in our community. This is an aspect that if everyone do a little thing, a drop, we can change the world. So please, if I need some volunteers to share with us an initiative that you know or that you want to implement in your region that impact. Please. Any volunteer? Come on.
You can raise your hands. If not, I'm just gonna pick someone. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Thank
Please.
So thank you. I just have a chat with my partner here, my friend here. So
Yes.
To be honest, sometimes I myself, when I see ocean, what I thought there are two contradictions. One is leisure, Bali, beautiful, but the other side is slum, fishermen, poor. So that's two situations that comes up with the ocean. So I myself have a concern about it. So what I'm doing, I have been doing, actually I tried to integrate the issue of fishing, illegal fishing, into my teaching. So through the transnational crime. So this is what I can do. And of
Sure.
course, I introduce ocean for my kids. So we always go to the sea, looking around every time we have a time. So that's what I can do for myself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And other examples?
So I'm the partner. She is my role model. I'm speaking as a local people. I'm from Bantul. Bantul is part of south of Jogja. That we have some coastline or shoreline, Indian Ocean. Yeah. I think when we speak about ocean in Yogyakarta, it's just like an irony. Why? Because in the recent times, Jogja facing problems. That is waste problem. So I think about this ocean is about political will, and it's an irony. I'm from Bantul that I know the escalation or growing number of domestic waste that thrown away to the river and then
Go
ended
to the ocean.
to the ocean, because the government or political will, they don't see ocean is such as an important role. So about waste, until now, I think, is still a complicated matters in Yogyakarta. So I think many residential or people just throwing away all the waste, domestic waste, because they don't have any choice.
They don't have any choice.
So ocean is just like, we never think about ocean actually. So I think Yogyakarta and ocean is an irony.
Yeah.
Sorry to say,
Yeah, sure.
but that is sad but true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And from our students, please. Any ideas? How can we change? Come on. Oh.
Okay, thank you, Miss. Interesting question. Yeah, reflecting to the past experience, my experience with local communities, that I fondly remember about a mangrove planting project, right? I think it is a very interesting for me because yeah, I am with a local people traveling by the boats in the mode of river, and I think this is yeah the step that it is a very useful for climate change. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, these type of projects are very, very special and important because mangroves is a very special environment and we need to protect it. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah. So hello, I am not Indonesian. I am from Honduras in Central America. I've been in Indonesia for 4 months. And so I think the blue economy is very important. In my country, we have access to the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And during my S1, doing my first degree in law, I had the opportunity to go snorkeling on a college trip. So that was my first time ever seeing a coral reef and what happens under the surface of water. It's nothing that you can see on Earth. I would never want to go to space. I would want to go to the bottom of the ocean. It's just that wonderful. I had the opportunity of swimming and seeing a canyon under me with currents and feeling the currents inside the canyon. It's absolutely wonderful. And then I went back maybe 3 years later and it was white. The coral was dead. And that was so impactful to me that now I do think I don't want my trash to go in the ocean. I'll be mindful of my plastic use and the waste. I don't want to support the overconsumption of this clothing because I don't want all these excess clothes to end up in landfill in some ocean. I'm mindful of the energy, electricity, what's better for the environment, all of that, because the image of seeing the dead coral was very impactful to me. And so by that time, this island in my country, they had already implemented no plastics in the entire island. So that was one initiative that was good, but I think it was a little bit too late, unfortunately. And so in Indonesia, I have gone to the ocean. It's very clean, so I'm very happy about that. There's no trash in the oceans or the beach would have been. So congratulations to all my Indonesian friends for that. And I do think the most important thing is literacy and going and be exposed to what happens to the ocean. So we come back to land and we come back to the city and to our daily lives, and we just have that in the pyramid of our priorities. It's gonna be much higher because we've gone and learned about it and seen for ourselves. So just that literacy and that exposure, I think is fundamental for initiatives and change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's very important. And well, the ocean literacy, it's not only about knowledge, it's about empathy, about being engaged and be there, feel it. And it's very important for everything in our lives. If we don't feel, we don't care. So yeah, we need to have some link to the nature and to the ocean. In Honduras, you are doing such a gorgeous improvement. You are including the ocean in the curriculum now. So it's a step forward because the new generation will be very different. I hope so. Thank you so much. So thank you for all the participation and the different aspects that we talked about are very important. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. And you can go further. One. Okay. This scheme I made for you is about the different dimension of ocean literacy. So it's not about not only about knowledge, but about awareness, about changing our mindset, changing our behavior, and be connected emotionally with the ocean, and try to get some action, not only talk about, but do some actions. This is all about the different dimension of ocean literacy, and this is very difficult to achieve. Okay, and this is a new research, how do you say, sector in education, because we need to know how can we change the people, and it's very difficult. You know that. You know? So beside the different dimension that we need to have in mind when we talk about the ocean literacy and do some research on that, it's all the factors that internal and external factors that influence the people. For example, our life experience influences, our values and our religion influences, and this is influencing all the dimension that we want to change in the people. So this is very complex to understand and to make changes in the society. You know, it's a huge, complex process. Next slide. So this is an example. I will talk only about the first one. So the outcomes of the ocean literacy we can synthesize this in 3 different aspects. The cognitive, it's about knowledge, the attitudes, and the behavior. So this is an example, okay? So we keep it in mind when we want to include the ocean in the curriculum. Even in a higher education, we need to think about this. For example, the cognitive learning, it's the first outcome and the easiest one to achieve. For example, the learner understands threats to ocean systems, such as pollution, for example. If we want to go further, the learner is able to show people the impact humanity is having on the ocean and the value of the healthy ocean. So the people can talk about that with your friends, or in the schools, or with your parents or your children. And the last and the more difficult to achieve is the behavioral change. So the learner starts, for example, picking up litter others leave on the beach. So we can act. If you know that, like you said, the pollution impact of the ocean, when we go to the beach and we see the plastic, we pick the plastic. We don't leave the plastic. Even if it's not our trash, we can pick it and leave it in where we can build. It's how the pick inside the beaches or the ocean. So if we know, we think, we can act. we cannot. It's the. I don't know why. I think it's from the psychology. People don't change easily, but when we talk about ocean literacy or other literacies, this is the goal. It's transform the knowledge into action. Okay? Next. Okay. So I will give you one example that what you could do in your country and everyone in each country. For example, if we think about coral conservation, for example, how can ocean literacy help? So the ocean literacy educators, for example, how can they help on the coral conservation? They can educate the communities or invite schools on doing some activities in reef protections. It occurs, for example, in the Caribbean region. And what could be the role of the higher education? Research on coral restoration, of course, this is a scientific aspect, but also give courses about ecotourism, not tourism as the classic one, but ecotourism. So the tourists can help in such of programs. So this is an example. How can we, make some difference? For example, if we talk about marine pollution, how can ocean literacy help? Raising awareness about plastic waste and promote responsible consumption. This is easy to speak about, but not so easy to implement. We need campaigns. We need to touch the heart of the people. It's not, if we say to anyone, yeah, you can pick the plastic from your street or the beach, maybe you cannot doing that because you don't understand the impact, okay? How can the higher education can help in here? Studies in waste management, for example, innovation on biodegradable materials. This is aspects that we can include in the curriculum of different courses. Okay, so I did several examples on different ocean issues that exist in our planet, and how can ocean literacy community helps, and how can higher education helps. So maybe if I don't have much more time, I can close the session here. I hope it was enlightening for you, and if you have some questions, be free to ask me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your wonderful insights. It's very enlightening for all of us because we rarely think about what our action can have impact to the oceans. And probably one of the closest thing is like the use of plastic bottles. In this seminar, it's also a self-criticism for us as well. And for my note, I think maybe my colleague also have told us about the illegal fishing. So Indonesia faces a lot of problem, not only with the overfishing, but also like illegal fishing. And then we also have some initiatives such as for reducing plastic waste. Some restaurants or coffee shops are no longer giving us cups, like plastic cups. We should bring our reusable cups, or giving us paper cups or paper straws. And we should be, I think we Indonesians should be proud because from what I heard, one of the newly elected president of this particular country, not Indonesia, wants to bring back plastic straw, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so we should be proud, or we are not using plastic straw anymore. And yes, I think your sharing, like highlighting how important is to have our behavior change is really important, because sometimes we just, it's really hard to change our behavior. Yeah, so it's a good message for all of us. Thank you. All right, for the next sessions, we are up for 3 questions. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands and then I'll take note of it. And 1, 2, 3. Okay. Please state your name and probably like where you come from and your question.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the chances that has given to mine. Let me introduce myself. I'm Gilang. I'm recently a postgraduate student. Already finished my thesis. So I mean, the questions is I want to address to both of the expert. For the first, for Mr. I'm sorry, sir, your name is quietly authentic. I can't remember it as well. So sorry. I mean, it's interesting to see the presentations about European Commissions. For your point of view, Indonesian itself already had the Indonesia law for personal data, I mean in legislative level. But I mean, I see in the presentations, European Union itself has regulatory about the legislative and the court itself. So I mean, it's embodied more perfectly, more than just regulatory legislative. So my questions is, in Indonesian version, is it the best versions if we just put it the regulation on the legislative itself, or we just to improve it in kind of the system of court itself? Because in many cases using personal data in Indonesian, we are so blamed by kind of hate speech and everything that used by ITE law in Indonesian has, I mean, it's kind of similar things also. And for the second questions to Dr. Okta, I already did my little research about Paris Agreement. So if I'm not mistaken, United States has declared that United States withdraw itself from the Paris Agreement. So I mean, how does it affect both for the agreement itself, or our as the member active of the Paris Agreement to face the recognitions? Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll keep the questions for. And then second, Pak Yuyun, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Yuyun. Well, I teach for environmental law in here and also law and technology. So I think it is very nice to have both of your presentation. And for Pak De Vries, I think for information that Indonesia already have like first on the information electronic information and electronic transaction act, and then we also have the data protection act. But however, this is there's still a lot of problems in the implementation of it. So on the data protection act, we solely based on the GDPR, the concept, even though the implementation is quite different. For example, for the data protection officer in GDPR, they are function as the supervisor for the data, right? But in Indonesia, the concept is because the huge amount of digital users in Indonesia, including the smallholders, UMKM or on the small digital company, which is quite interesting fact that during pandemic, those are who survive and supporting the economic in Indonesia for the smallholder business company, even digital business company. The interesting thing is the DPO is the design of DPO in Indonesia is not only the supervisor but also the organizer of the data protection and data data organizer itself, not the supervisor. So this is quite I think quite complex. That's why until today, even though we do have this Data Protection Act in 2023, and it's supposedly a year after the enaction of this law, we should have the implementing regulation. Until today, we don't have it because perhaps it is too problematic or too complex. Well, I need your opinion on it, based on how the implementation on GDPR in EU. And then the second one for Pak De Vries is, what do you think the link between the DSA and then the GDPR and also the AI Act, which is very recent, last May, right? If I'm not mistaken. In perhaps creating some very distinct influences on the digital market governance in EU. I think that's very interesting because AI still be recognized. I mean, the law itself is still considered as quite general. Only like, well, if I'm my short perception of AI regulation is like only to give more position standing on the AI ethical charter from 2018, something like that. I mean, is there any distinct differences could make by this interlink between these three regulation? And for Ibu Rachel, I think it's very interesting what you mentioned about ocean literacy, and then what my colleagues mentioned about seeing is believing, right? I mean, if we don't see the ocean, then sometimes, of course, this is our guilt that we don't think about that. Even though Jogja also supported by ocean, but from this campus, it is still 30 kilometers. The ocean is we are apart in 30 kilometers, so we rarely think about the ocean. But I think that's why the initiation of this seminar is that in digital era, the digital age, we don't need to that, but we don't need that seeing is believing, because we can also see by our gadget and others. But what I want to ask is the interesting fact in Indonesia, because you talk about the ocean literacy, but however, there is also problem on blue washing. When you don't have enough digital ocean literacy, but the information that you get, and you don't have that reliable and trusted media or something, but then you get blue washing on the false information. For example, in Indonesia, just recently we have this pagar laut on the ocean fences. It is very legal problems related to how several companies can claim and then put the fences on the ocean. Even though it is still below 4 miles nautical miles, but it is bringing some chaos and then problem, especially for the access of the fishermen in the several parts in Indonesia. However, if I take a look from the information that circulating around, there are many information about that these fences actually used for preventing the abrasion. So this is the blue washing that came up when we have no good ocean literacy. So I want your opinion on that. Thank you.
And the third question, please.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Thank you for the chance given to me. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Afara Hutomo Sebastian. I'm an active student from Faculty of Law. So my question is actually a short one. I heard that the use of social media platforms like TikTok in political campaigns to influence public opinions becomes more common. To influence people about their economic policies, but when they are elected, their policy often failed or doesn't give any meaningful impact or little to less to the people itself. And because of that, what can we do as students or individuals to critically assess whether a campaign is ethical, truthful, or manipulative? Thank you.
Questions. Okay, thank you for all of your questions. I'll give the chance maybe to you first, yes, to respond. First is from Gilang. He's asking about is Indonesia already going to the right direction by having legislative or like regulations on the personal data protection, or should we learn something from the EU?
Thank you so much for your question. It's difficult for me to assess whether you are on the right direction and also any way to give an opinion on that. And I think you also wanted to, or you raised the point of the relationship between the legislation and the courts. I think both are very important. So legislation is important, and we see in the EU that now the legislator has become very much more important than it was like 20 years ago, because like 20 years ago it was very much the court setting the agenda for the development of the law, like a constitutional court. So that was the Court of Justice in Luxembourg, and the national courts were following that. Now we see the legislator. However, we are now reached a point where the legislator seems to a little bit taking a step back, because we have the green and digital transition, and we heard a wonderful story about how important ocean literacy is. In the EU, we have the Green Deal implementing through legislation, but we see that there is a political backlash also in the European Parliament to pursue the green agenda further. So here the legislative process has come to not an entirely a halt, but it has been, you could say, the development is diminishing. So there the court comes in. But then you have a problem, because we have, for example, talking about the environment, we have had important cases also in the Netherlands. One was the Urgenda case, where environmental groups actually sued either the government or private parties like Shell, that they should do more to protect the environment. And the Dutch courts at first were willing to follow their arguments. And they indeed said that the government should step up its actually agenda to reduce CO2. And now we have had the latest judgment where the court didn't want to follow these arguments anymore. And there is a reason for that. I think as well as the legitimacy of the courts. How far can the court go in setting the agenda? No, because after all, we have on the one hand the courts and the rule of law, but we have also democracy and the will of the people, and that's the legislation. So there should be some balance between the two. And I think also for Indonesia it will be important that you have both actually actors. They should play a role, but because then the popular will of the people will say like, and politicians will say like, you see, it's the courts again. They undermine our authority, the authority of the legislator. So you have to be very careful with that. But there should be a role for both, I think. Then regarding the second question was, I think, for Raquel, no? Should I go on with the other questions, or Raquel?
I need to remember the question, sorry.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, yeah, US already left them. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because US left the Paris Agreement. Yeah. Well, it's a difficult question for me. Well, the impact that the Paris Agreement has in the world. Well, it's not. I am not. How do you say it? Usually, I tell what every declaration and agreement, because the people who declare and sign the agreements, after that they can, even in Europe, they cannot achieve the objectives of the agreement. So somehow I think it's not a blue washing, but maybe a little bit of washing to the society. Well, yes, we are debating everything, the green and the blue and well, everything, the climate change. Yes, we are going to do everything we can to protect the humanity. But then I believe it's only in the paper and not in the reality.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, and then probably coming to the second question, there are two questions from Pak Yuyun. First is, how is the implementation of GDPR in the EU? And he also wants to know the second question, what are the links between the GDPR, DSA, and AI Act in creating digital market governance?
Yeah, also very interesting and quite challenging questions. So implementation or application of the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU. Well, first maybe what I think is the huge benefit is that we have a regulation. We used to have a directive, which is another legal instrument, as you might know. Now we have a regulation that applies to all 27 member states with some kind of new innovative rights related to data protection, like, for example, the famous right to be forgotten on the internet. And there has been case law about that, and that's codified in the GDPR. So it's a very far-reaching instrument, which is enforced by mainly national data protection supervisors. And there we have also a problem, because the main data protection supervisor that is in charge of enforcing the GDPR in the EU is in Ireland. And why is it in Ireland? Because the big tech firms have their establishment in Ireland, in the EU. So they are kind of overburdened in enforcing the GDPR with respect to the big tech firms. That's one of the problems, and that's why in the Digital Services Act they decided to do it differently, that the European Commission has a stronger role in the enforcement vis-à-vis big firms. Now, you also mentioned that the smaller firms, like in Indonesia, that they are, of course, important for innovation, for economic development, and they should not be overburdened with rules on data protection, and I agree with that. I mean, the GDPR has caused a lot of bureaucracy in Europe as well. So very much work for national data protection supervisors, data protection officers in small firms, big firms. In our university, for example, you don't want to know what you have to go through in order to comply with the GDPR. So maybe it has gone too far in legislating. That's certainly, I think, a point of criticism that you can make with respect to the EU rules, and you should not copy that here in Indonesia. So it's good to learn from that and to see, okay, for the more smaller and medium-sized firms, maybe it's good to provide for some exemptions. Now, the second question relates to the relationship between the three different acts, the AI Act, the Digital Services Act, and the General Data Protection Act. So, the General Data Protection Act obviously really focuses on data protection and privacy. Whereas the AI Act, for example, also focuses on the development and the marketing of AI software. And how should, in the design of artificial intelligence, already certain important principles like transparency, but also fundamental rights and ethical concerns be implemented. So the value of the AI Act is that all AI software that is going to be marketed in the European Union should comply with certain, you could say, standards that relate to ethics, that relate to fundamental rights. And this is then being the oversight, the supervision, again, is both the European Commission as well as the national national supervisors. And there's a fight going on in the Netherlands, for example, who is in charge of supervising the AI Act. That can be the data protection supervisor, but also the Authority for Consumer and Markets. And the Authority for Consumer and Markets is involved in supervising the Digital Services Act. So, but also the Data Protection Supervisor, where the Digital Services Act involves personal data. So what we see, we have a number of administrative authorities that are involved in the supervision and enforcement of the digital legislation of the European Union at national level. These are independent authorities, and we have the courts. At European Union level, it's always the European Commission, and they have set up a separate unit within the Commission, a digital unit, that enforces digital legislation, which is not independent, because the European Commission is, we can say, okay, is it independent, but it's subject to political influences. And also influences by tech firms, for example. So it's an interesting constellation of national and EU supervision. And we will have to wait and see for a couple of years how this is going to work out. But there's a strong commitment on the part of what I know, the people working for the national authority in the Netherlands, the Data Protection Supervisor and the Authority for Consumers and Markets, to properly enforce this legislation. And the courts also play a role, because all this legislation can have direct effect. You as an individual can go to court and claim your rights under the GDPR or under the digital services. And the courts have the obligation to apply it and enforce it. If they don't do so, eventually the Court of Justice can impose fines on member states. And so you really have to comply with EU legislation. There's a whole institutional structure in order to see to that. I don't know if that answers your question a little bit. Yes? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And going to Raquel again, I think there is a question also from Pak Yuyun, whether on your opinion or views on the ocean literacy and the problem of blue washing, especially in this digital age.
Well, you made some difficult questions to me. Yeah, the Paris Agreement and now the blue washing, it's, well, it's linked. Well, my opinion about the blue washing, yeah, it's a huge problem, because I am from the ocean literacy community, and to work on this type of initiatives, we need some budget, we need financial support to develop projects about ocean literacy. And when we talk with possible funders, it's very difficult to not to be tempted to be engaged in the blue washing, because when we ask support, financial support to the private sector, usually they want to show their blue and green responsibility without doing such the efforts. So they use the ocean literacy community to do the blue washing. So it's very hard to say no, because we need support, financial support, but otherwise it's against what we need, because ocean literacy, it's about changing people, it's about being aware of. So if the private sector want to do blue washing, we cannot doing that, So it's very hard to say no, but of course we need to say no to this type of support. But it occurs everywhere. But well, if the better way is to have the government support and not the private sector support.
Questions from Afarel, which asking a very difficult questions, I believe, and how do we actually assess whether or not a campaign through social media is truthful, or is it just selling a program? Thank you.
Yeah, very difficult, good question, of course, and also what your role may be, as our role, so not only you, but also our role in this. Maybe I come to your question about the blue washing. We have a phenomenon in Europe as well, greenwashing, which is similar, and there's now legislation actually which seeks to combat these or does not accept these forms of greenwashing. So that's also a route to go to see, well, there are limits to what you can do as private actors in this respect. Regarding the social, how do you see? It's sometimes very difficult to actually see. So what they did in the TikTok case was, or that you have certain interest groups, they make accounts, and they see whether indeed there is this recommender system recommending them to vote for a particular candidate. And so they set up certain accounts, and they are going to look for video posts and other posts by different presidential candidates, and then they see how the platform actually all the time seeks to steer them towards a particular candidate. So actually there is certain independent research that is carried out that indeed shows, and TikTok denies that, by the way, that indeed they are all the time being recommended significantly more than other presidential candidates to turn to this particular one. But what I think we also need is more activism on the part of, we discussed that yesterday evening, on the part of you, us, all against these kind of social media platforms. Of course, activism can consist of different things. So join certain independent interest groups, but also, maybe you have to give up your account at the end. And I know that is very difficult. What I said, I know that quite a number of colleagues at Utrecht University gave up X. And you can agree or disagree with that, but and they got quite a lot of information from that, but they simply don't want anymore to support the platform, because we have to realize that on the one hand, it is presented as the platform for supporting freedom of expression, but it's also a business model. In the end, it is a business model. It's all about commercialization. But there's another thing that I should want to point out as well. In authoritarian states, there sometimes the platforms might be the only way to express your opinion. We should not forget about that as well. So it's a very complex situation, but I would very much be in favor of more seeing whether, as an activist, we can maybe build our more open source cooperative platforms that do not have a commercial kind of purpose, but more is really owned by the people themselves. And I think it's possible, and there are already certain platforms, but there are maybe not sufficient, you know, people yet present on those platforms. We have the network effects, no? So we want our friends to be there as well. But that's maybe a possibility to go forward, a kind of cooperative system, as we also know in the physical offline world, from cooperative companies, farms, etc. Why not set up a cooperative platform, which is run by the people themselves? So we have to think a bit more out of the box and develop our own platforms. And I think you are perfectly able to do that as a new generation. So yeah, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Thank you for your answers. And before continuing to the second sessions of question and answers, I'd like to use my moderator privilege, if you may say that. I actually have a question for Professor De Vries. So after understanding the relations between EU and then its member states, I actually wonder, like, students often come to me or to other lecturers as well, I believe, wanting to do a comparative study between Indonesia and the EU, simply because Indonesia does not have the regulations, like for example the AI Act, and EU has the regulations. But in my opinion, they are of a different powers, if you may say so, because Indonesia's legislation is applicable within its own jurisdiction, while EU's regulation is supranational. It's applicable for its member states, and as you have explained, it may override what is already exist in the member countries' regulations. So in that kind of situations, what should I do, or what should we, the lecturers, do?
Thank you for this yet again challenging question. Yeah, in that sense, I think if you compare, I think you can always draw inspiration from each other's legislations, no? So, and I think it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. It's not that, because I think the discussion on the GDPR shows that maybe the GDPR, there are elements in that legislation that can be interesting for the Indonesian legislator to incorporate, but maybe not all of the elements are just as good, because they do not fit, you know, within the national legal context. And so there's also a national cultural legal context that may be, well, very different. So I think you should be aware of that. There may also be developments now in Indonesia taking place that could well be interesting for the EU to take on board. I know, I don't know that so well, but for Brazil, for example, they have developed their AI legislation as well, which is interesting for maybe the EU to take a look at how did they do that. Because the EU has a very particular approach to regulating artificial intelligence, which I also am quite critical of. So maybe there are other jurisdictions where they have new ideas, fresh ideas, that may be helpful for us. So I think it's a two-way street. And indeed, you are very right, without ignoring the fact that the EU as a kind of international organization with its own institutional structure is very different from a nation state like Indonesia. So that is something you always have to keep in the back of your mind. Yeah, it doesn't prevent you from drawing inspiration from the substantive law that is in place. And we have had several Indonesian also PhD candidates making comparisons. So I have Ali Abdillah, who's now a second year PhD candidate in Utrecht. He's from Jakarta, and he is comparing Asian collaboration with the EU internal market, which is extremely difficult because we have different institutional structure, we have different laws, it's supranational, and Asian you probably all know that it's very difficult to attain more collaboration within ASEAN, and that there is a very, the powerful Indonesia vis-a-vis the city-state of Singapore. No, that Singapore wants open trade, and Indonesia maybe is so powerful so it can prevent that. So the interests are very different. But it doesn't mean that you can draw inspiration from how the EU has legislated, how the courts have ruled, and to see whether you can implement parts of that into the Asian kind of institutional collaboration, how you can improve that within the current situation. And that is what he's doing. So his first publications will come out soon. And so I think that can work. But you always have to be aware of the differences. As long as you do that, it's fine.
Okay, thank you so much for the enlightenment, Prof. De Vries. I'll open the second session of questions. First question, second question. 3 person? Okay, just 2 first. Please mention your name and then your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the chance. Hello, my name is Maricinta Manamanya Maknawardano. I'm an active student of law. I have a question. I am very interested in the beauty and fashion industry, and as you may know, the industry is very oversaturated. And also, there's an interesting point that you mentioned before, that there is greenwashing happening. And it's very deceptive, very performative and misleading. And I think monetizing a very critical movement is very concerning. So what are your stance or solutions or view about this problem in the beauty and fashion industry? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Coming to the second question, please.
Hello, thank you. I'm Aziza. I'm just from the public. I like looking at these things because I would like to empower myself as a consumer. I would like to ask to the lady, because you are talking about digital literacy, do you have any, how to say, could you share any digital literacy movement that you encounter that empowers senior citizens? Because, for example, in Europe, well, the demography is going to the senior citizens, and because if a government is good, they would want their citizen to live a long time, which means at some point there will be a lot of senior citizens, and senior citizens they have problems with loneliness and everything else. And if you talk about digital literacy in terms of environmental, if we can empower senior citizens, it helps with their mental health, one thing, but also tap into their potential, because senior citizens have experienced a longer span of life, including moments where plastic was not so problematic. And because in Indonesia, we have several issues with waste, including the burning of waste. In olden times, burning waste is okay because, well, there was no plastic, for lack of a better excuse. But now, if you want to ask people to stop burning waste, then they will say in the olden days, you know. And Indonesia, we have youth, but only a small percentage is in, say, higher education or in the environmental movements, but or access enough digital literacy in terms of the ecological movements. But if the government did good, these youths will become senior citizens. So can you share several initiatives where senior citizens are being empowered in terms of, well, utilizing environment, including the oceans and others, but not damaging
Okay,
them.
we have
Thank
your
you.
points. Thank you. Okay, Raquel, maybe to put it into context, before I think some gentleman over there already says that Yogyakarta itself facing a big waste problem where the government or the related institutions does not collect waste from the residential area. So we are responsible to organize and dispose our own waste, which results to a lot of problems. Some people pay for a private companies to dispose, it happens, yeah, to dispose their waste to the end of, we call it tempat pembuangan akhir, so the final disposal of waste, probably, if that's the correct terms. But some other people, and like most of Yogyakarta, burn their waste. So they just put it on the ground in front of their houses. They set the fire and burn it. It causes a lot of pollution, of course, yes, and we don't know what is in the waste that is being burned. We don't know whether it is plastic, whether it's food waste. They just mix them up and burn them. It's very problematic, it's unhealthy, and probably to put that into context of what Aziza asks you is, if we talk about the senior citizens and then we remind them about it's not safe to burn waste, it's dangerous for everybody, and then they say, oh, in the olden days we did that and it's okay. So that's the context for the questions. Probably you would like to address the first question first regarding the greenwashing in the fashion industry. What are your views and probably solution on that? Thank you.
Well, yes. So about the first question about the fashion industry and the huge problem that the fashion industry impact in our planet, and this is not well explained everywhere. I saw some documentaries about tracking the fashion until the end of the days of the clothes, and is very concerning because the industry what is doing now is the fast fashion is impacting a lot, and we have a lot of waste, a lot of clothes waste, and they don't burn, but they transport this type of clothes to Africa, for example, and to Asia as well, to poor countries, and this is a greenwash movement as well, because they tell the society that they will pick the clothes and recycle, and it's not true. And even in some countries you have some huge containers that you can pick your clothes, and it's supposed to be donated to countries that don't have clothes, but it's not true as well, because it will end in mountains and valleys with clothes everywhere, and then in some countries they resell these clothes. So this is a very big issue, because in the in the countries, and the fashion is very it's less and less expensive, like Temu and the other Shein entities, they sell it so easily. It's very easy to buy anything, you know. So the girls and the women, with a click, they can buy everything, and they don't realize the impact of it. So, in my opinion, we should have campaigns to be against this type of how do you say, buy this type of fish, you know. But it's very difficult to change the behavior of the society. But I think if you, the youngest generation, think about that and realize that you don't need so many clothes and so many makeup and so many, you know, things like that, you can also do like a campaign against it. So maybe if we can use the other type of fashion, like a slow fashion instead of fast fashion, if it's become a new model, maybe we can change this issue. Maybe with TikTok even.
Thank you, Raquel. I think Prof. De Vries also have something to say.
If I may, because yeah, I fully agree with Raquel. There are some in the EU, some legislative responses to that already. So I very briefly mentioned this eco-design regulation, and in that regulation there's a prohibition to destroy unsold textiles, fashion. Because one of the things in our digital economy is, of course, that you can order as many shoes or clothes, whatever you want, and you send it, we have the right as consumers to send it all back, period, and then send everything back. And what do the producers do? The manufacturers, they destroy everything because they cannot sell it anymore. Well, that is prohibited from now on. That's one aspect. Another one, new regulation, a law which has been adopted, is called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And that also has extraterritorial effect because it requires manufacturers, including the fashion industry, to trace back the origins of the product, to take into account the sustainability effects, but also the human rights effects. Because many clothes, of course, are produced still in countries by children. And that's part of the, so there are certain legal approaches to this, but it will not help always the situation that Raquel mentions, like in Africa, because there's another effect that all these clothes, for example, from the US, are shipped to Ghana, to Africa, and this kills the local small and medium-sized companies that make clothes for the people, because you can just pick up your clothes. So it has also a huge economic effect and results into poverty, you could say. So there are various effects of the fashion industry. I think it's one of the biggest polluters, you are right, and the beauty industry too. So there are now the first legal steps, and I think they're very important and they should be adopted globally, but it's not yet enough.
Thank you for your response. I hope it answers your questions. And to add some more FYI about Yogyakarta and Indonesia, there are a lot of shops, like second-hand clothing shops in Indonesia that is imported from, you know, countries. Probably the closest one is Australia, because there are a lot of second-hand clothing sold in Australia. When I was there, I also found some bins, recycling bins that you shared about like you can donate your clothes here, but eventually we don't know if it is really sold in Australia or is it sent to other developing countries or neighboring countries such as Indonesia and being sold here. So if you guys are ever heard of thrift shop in Yogyakarta, and I believe there are many of them, so we don't know if it is like a sustainable practice or not. But okay, now coming up to the second questions from Aziza, asking if Raquel could share any digital literacy movements or any movements that can empower senior citizens.
Yes, I know some projects that empower senior citizens in ocean literacy activities. In Canada, for example, in my opinion, it's the country who have more ocean literate citizens from all around the world, because they have an ocean literacy strategy for the country. And they included everyone in this movement, even though the people that are from traditional knowledge based, the indigenous communities are engaged in the ocean literacy projects, and the senior as well. So the senior people from Canada are acting as actors, doing, telling stories in schools about how they lived before the plastic pollution exists and all the climate change that occur now. And the stories that they tell in schools have like a background to discuss how they live now. So it's a win-win situation, because they have a lot of senior people that don't have anything to do. They are alone in their homes, but they can act as actors, and they can share stories with the youngest generation, and I think it's beautiful. And it's an example of what we can do, joining different age groups and different sectors of the society. For me, this is the best case. Unfortunately, it's not it's not usual to have senior people working on this type of initiative. Unfortunately, because it's true. We have a lot of senior people in Europe. For example, it's a huge problem. In my country, it's a very big problem, and the majority of the senior people are alone, live alone, and it's very sad to see it. But I know some local initiatives that bring these people into the activities, but it's not, it's not a large, largest project. It's only local-based initiatives.
I hope that answers your question, Mbak Aziza. Okay, thank you. So I think since we are running out of time, I'd like to thank Prof. De Vries and also Dr. Raquel Costa for sharing a very fruitful discussions with us today. Thank you. And I'll give back and also thank you for the participants for your questions and also sharing with everyone here. I'd like to give back to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
Maybe please give us applause, some applause. For the first, we would like to express our gratitude to the speakers, responders and moderators, as well as to all the attendees who have participated in these engaging discussions. Next, we will proceed with the presentation of souvenirs to the speakers and a group photo. We kindly ask the chairman of the 79th Disnatalis of Faculty of Law Universitas Gadjah Mada, please, Mrs. Dina Widya Putri Karyodimeja, to come forward.
Terima kasih.
Thank you so much. Good job.
Take some photos. Take picture together. Ibu Irna, Mas Virga.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful. Really. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank the audience for your attention and also the wonderful questions that you raised. Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Distinguished participants, we have now reached the end of our event. We would like to thank all attendees for their participation. Good afternoon, and we look forward to meeting you at future events. We kindly invite you to enjoy the refreshment prepared for you in the corridor of the auditorium and continue your discussion with the colleges. Thank you and have a great day.
We also thanks to our general support from the partner and the sponsors like Bank Rakyat Indonesia, PT Pertamina Persero, Triweka Rinanti and Partners, and Sinarmas.